Always beware of a person that gets up in front of a crowd and says, I am the person bringing in the future. I have the answer. I want to recover the universal message embedded in spirituality. If anyone ever gets up in front of a crowd and says that, always be skeptical. Be very skeptical. So, I am the future, right? I have the answer. I kid you not. I have recovered the universal message embedded in spirituality. That message, that answer, is 42. That was a literary reference. Don't panic if you didn't get it. It's mostly harmless. So in a nutshell, what I want to say this morning is this. I don't think spirituality has anything to do with beliefs. I think spirituality invites us into a certain mode of being, a way of engaging the world. So I want to invite you to suspend your disbelief and just buy what I'm selling for the next 15 minutes, like you were watching Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, Return of the Jedi. It has to be Return of the Jedi. And see if what I'm saying lights up something in you. And you can look at it this way. If you don't like what I'm saying, you get to leave after this. I'm stuck with me. I really am. So I want to share the message this morning through the magic trick. In Christopher Nolan's film, The Prestige, we see that the magic trick has 3 parts. There's the pledge, where the magician shows you a bird. And then he puts the bird behind a curtain. Right? And he utters the magical words, Hocus Pocus. Oh, what's that? And then comes the turn, which is when the veil is removed and the bird disappears magically. Now, if you stop the trick here, people will get anxious. It won't be a very good trick. The third part, and the hardest part of any magic trick, is called the prestige, right? Oh, over there. Nobody looked that time. It's the return of the bird. Now, usually if you see a magic trick with a bird, the bird that returns at the end is not the same one that disappeared at the beginning, but it looks a lot like the original. So this morning, let's take a look at the magic trick as it applies to human existence. Needs. We'll start with needs. We all have different kinds of needs. There are medical needs, like when you scrape your knee. There are economic needs, like maybe you want to buy a new toy. And then there's social needs. For example, we have to learn how to get along with our friends. These are just your average, everyday sort of needs. But for each of us, there's a need that seems like it's not that easy to fix. And it's hard to describe because it's different for each and every one of us, but we all have it. It's a sense of lack that we can't quite fulfill. And I'm talking about that sense you have. Actually, I won't say you. I'll keep it about me, right? There's this deep sense I have that I am broken or not quite good enough or I don't measure up in some way. And I fight against it, trying to fix the problem and be better. So if you feel that way today or if you've ever felt like that, you're not alone. And often I feel like this lack can be filled, this problem solved, that this brokenness can be made whole by a particular thing. Like there's something or someone that can make me feel like I'm enough. This is the sacred object, whatever that is. It's the sacred object. It's the thing that promises us that we can be whole and complete. Now, sacred objects aren't objects as such, right? It's the idea of the object that will fulfill me. It's the fantasy of what's behind the magician's curtain. So when I was 5, what I needed was candy. I needed it. When I was 10, there was the Lego pirate ship set. And at 15, in the middle of puberty, it was that gorgeous girl in my art class. Of course, by the time I was 20, I realized that beauty wasn't everything and I needed a soulmate. And then when I was 25, I realized that more than anything, I wanted to be a father. And not long after that, I realized my deepest desire was to get a grown-up job. I needed one after that. So the sacred object is the fantasy of the bird hidden behind the magician's curtain. For Wile E. Coyote, the sacred object is a different bird. So kids, you probably don't remember this, but there used to be a cartoon where this coyote always chased this bird, the roadrunner. And I think the roadrunner is a great example of a sacred object. I mean, what makes Wile E. want the roadrunner so bad? He's bony and scrawny, he's just claws and a beak. Why does Wile E. want him? It's because he can't be had, right? He can't get him. It's kind of like if my son Samuel asks for a Lego set and I say no for whatever reason. You know, Samuel only wants it more. He'll say, "Please, Daddy, you'll never have to buy me anything ever again. This will count for my birthday and Christmas, please." Does that sound familiar, kids? Does that sound familiar? The thing we want most, the sacred object, is sacred because it's prohibited. We want what we can't have. And every magician knows that. The most important part of the pledge in any magic trick is that a normal object is made special by being hidden or prohibited. Makes it special because it's not there. In the same way, our sacred object is just like a regular object, except you can't have it. We can't talk about these things existing or not existing. Instead, sacred objects insist. The house, the job, the relationship, the deity, the roadrunner, all insist that they will make us whole and fix that sense of brokenness, if we could get it. They insist that we'll feel successful, loved, morally good, if it could only be attained. But then there's the turn, there's the disappearance. So in an episode of The Family Guy, do we have any Family Guy fans in here? We see this parody scene of Wile E. Coyote. He finally catches the roadrunner and he's sitting at the dinner table with a friend, and the roadrunner's cooked up like a Thanksgiving Day turkey, and Wile E's friend turns to him and he asks, "So now what are you going to do?" "Oh, well, I don't know. This is the only thing I've known for 20 years, he says. Oscar Wilde once said, "The only thing worse than not getting what you want is getting it." So if we break through the obstacle or the prohibition, whatever it is that's keeping us from grasping our sacred object, when the magician utters the magic words, "Hocus, Pocus," and the veil is removed, we find that the sacred object isn't there. We find that the thing that promised to fill our heart with love or success or goodness will not do the job. So to me, one of the most heart-wrenching examples of the experienced loss of the sacred object is found in the movie Toy Story. Buzz Lightyear is a space ranger. He has absolute faith that he has a real laser gun on his arm, that he can fly, that he is meant to succeed in his mission from Star Command. He's sure that he's landed on a distant planet in his spaceship, which we know is the box he came in, right? His entire identity rests on the idea that he is really a space ranger. And about halfway through the movie, Buzz encounters a commercial on TV for the Buzz Lightyear toy. which confirms that Star Command is made up, that his laser is just a flashing light, and the commercial ends with a disclaimer that says, "Not a flying toy." And confronted with this traumatic revelation, Buzz decides to test whether he can fly or not. And I'm sure he had his doubts as he climbs up the stair rail, opens his wings, and jumps. And the scene fades with Buzz lying on the floor, one arm popped off with Randy Newman singing in the background. Clearly, I will go sailing no more. And I've done that so often. I mean, I grew up with a surety that there was a loving God out there looking over me. My identity, my hope, everything I knew about the world was hinged on this surety. But at some point, I lost the metaphysical gods, the God out there, and I couldn't hold on to that belief for whatever reason. And it wrecked my world. For me, the loss of that belief was not just a rational process. For me, this was a felt loss, like when you miss somebody you love that's died. This is the point of apocalypse, when the magician's veil is removed, when all that we've held on to, believed in, hoped for, or worked toward disappears. When you discover that you are not a space ranger, that catching the Roadrunner does not grant you success, that your sacred object isn't even there. And then we have a choice. We can find a new, shiny sacred object, a thing that again promises to make us whole and complete. Communities can be formed in this way. Faith communities are particularly formed in this way because it's a lot easier to look at the other and see how broken and messed up they are because their sacred object isn't as good as our sacred object. We discover that the sacred object we've pinned all our hopes and faith upon isn't going to make us whole, and we turn to a community with different values that simply restage the magic trick for us. And we accept a new pledge or creed or set of principles. That's one choice. But then there's another choice, and communities can be formed this way as well. The entrance into this type of community doesn't begin with a promise to fill the lack or answer the problem or give you something that will make you whole and fulfilled. Rather, this type of community emanates from an admission of the brokenness within ourselves. In this type of community, there isn't a promise for future wholeness. So the good news of the message today is not that you can be happy, whole, or fulfilled. No. The good news is that life is a disaster, and you don't have the answer. And you might be thinking, what? How is that good news? It's wonderful news, because we know it already. I mean, I could say I'd be happy if I had whatever it is, fill in the blank. But either I spend my life chasing that thing that I think will fulfill me, which is awful, or I get it and I realize it won't fulfill me, which is depressing. But if we can discover that happiness is not over the hill, it's not just out of reach, we can enact the prestige. It's the final stage of the magic trick. There we find the return of the sacred, not in a fantastic object that promises to make us whole, but in the tension of life itself. It's still sacred, but it's not the same sort of sacred. We find that even though our mission from Star Command is a fantasy, we're still Buzz Lightyear. And as Woody reminds him, you are a cool toy. It's in Tom Hanks' voice, though. In the prestige, we find that the sacred ceases to be a promise of a future and becomes an awareness and appreciation of what is going on right now. We experience the sacred in those we love and in those we rage against. It doesn't matter if they're one of us or one of them. Whether we have what we think we want or not, either way, both experiences are sacred. The joy of new life is sacred because it fills you now. The fear of the unknown is sacred because it fills you now. The love you feel when you look into your child's eyes for the first time is sacred because it fills you now, and the suffering you experience when a loved one takes their last breath is sacred because it fills you now. And perhaps this undercuts all my claims. I can't bring you the future. I can't give you an answer. I can't uncover the universal message embedded in spirituality. All I can give you is a broken hallelujah. So be skeptical.